Greetings, this is Ben Woodbury, welcoming you to the July edition of the Friends of History First Wednesday lecture series in cooperation with the New Mexico History Museum. We're fortunate today to have with us Andy Otto, Executive Director of the Santa Fe Watershed Association, along with his colleague William Henry Mee, the unofficial mayor of Agua Fria. Henry has been a longtime resident of the village and has many stories of which he can share. The presentation today will focus on the Santa Fe Watershed and its place in New Mexico history. At the end of the presentation, we will have an opportunity to have a live Q&A session. You will find on both Facebook and YouTube the opportunity to write in on chat and ask your questions, and we will do our best to answer as many as possible in the time allowed. So at this point, let me turn the presentation over to Andy Otto.
Great. Well, thank you, Ben. We're glad to be here. I'm the Executive Director of the Santa Fe Watershed Association. We've been in existence since 1997, and our mission is working on the health and vibrancy of the Santa Fe River watershed. And it's the watershed approach that is unique with so many different folks. We're a non-governmental 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we are supported by government grants and, of course, private donations too. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the geology first of the Santa Fe River Watershed Association. And I'm going to pull the map up here. So this is our region, and the area in red, roughly, is the Santa Fe River Watershed. A key to note here is the fact that, of course, the river runs right through it, and right through the middle of it, from Lake Peak all the way down to the Rio Grande. The Santa Fe watershed, it's on the eastern side of the Rio Grande Rift. That's the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. The west side of the rift was actually the Sierra Nacimiento Mountains. And these were done, it's about 40 miles difference. And these north-south running ridges are part of the lower Rocky Mountains. And the Rocky Mountains have been kind of, they call it the backbone of the North American continent. They have been very stable over the millennia, with minor changes. And we see that in Colorado, of course, and in Arizona and in New Mexico. A couple of things that happened, though, was a block faulting. Basically, the area that the Rio Grande is in now dropped, and compared to the Sierra Nacimiento and the Sangre de Cristos. And this caused, of course, a rift valley where the Rio Grande flows into. The Jemez Mountains, the Valle Caldera, was a relatively recent addition. And it was that explosion, if you will, that caused a lot of problems for the Santa Fe River. It used to run just straight from east to west into the Rio Grande. Well, when this all happened, all of a sudden we had an intrusion. It blocked the river. So the river had to head south, as you can see in the area in red, and then it finally found an area to get through to the west in what we now call Canyon Road. The rocks in the Sangre de Cristos are really old. You can tell I'm not a geologist, but they're basically pre-Cambrian and Pennsylvanian era, and they're basalt. And the basalt rock is that black rock that you see at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. It's a very old rock that's been laying down quite a number of years ago, of course. And then in the Caja del Rio, which is what we call now the La Bajada the drop off, if you will, on this map they call it the Mesa Negra. That was a fairly recent event, and roughly the 47 miles of the river was caused by the river having to meander through that as well, and so that gave us this 47 miles of Santa Fe River watershed that we have now. So what's happened since the inception of this Rift Valley was, of course, the river was starting to flow and it was taking sediments with it. What we have going on is formation of what they call the Santa Fe group of sediments. And these sediments are so important to our aquifers, what are now our aquifers. The lower one was called the Tesuque sediment or Tesuque layer. And this was is a pinkish tan silty sandstone. And it was put down in the Miocene era, which is, again, fairly recent, just before the current Quaternary era. And the Ancha Formation lies on top of that. And the Ancha Formation is our key aquifer area. And it's about 300 feet deep in depth, if you want, in the western side. As you can imagine, these sediment layers are shallower in the east toward the source of the mountains, the Sangre de Cristos, and they get steeper as it flows more toward the Rio Grande. So the Ancha Formation has a variety of origins, including poorly sorted alluvial deposits, that's that floodplain type of stuff, and gravel deposits. And these have been going on for roughly the last 11 million years. A couple of things that we go on with all of this is why do we even worry about the geology? Well, it's the geology that created the watershed, and the watershed that provides the water that brings the plants, animals, and people to this small corner of the Southwest. So with that, I'm going to introduce William Henry Mee, the unofficial mayor of Agua Fria, longtime associate and friend, and a guy who knows more about what's happened in our little watershed for the last 2,000 years. So William Henry Mee, thank you.
Thank you, Andy, and it's great to be here with the Friends of History. And so I'm going to share my screen, and let's see, and I'll give you a presentation on a lot of things that I've learned over the years, and especially with Agua Fria Village, because that's where I'm from. So it's kind of an obscure village, but we've always been interested in history, and that's why my subtitle's The Santa Fe River Valley's Forgotten History. And these are my acknowledgements here. We've worked a lot with the Northern Rio Grande National Heritage Area, and we did some oral history interviews of Agua Fria residents for the New Mexico Historic Records Advisory Board. Building on what Andy was saying, almost a billion years ago, we were underwater. So that's an amazing kind of fact. And when you go out to my area, and this is a picture from the Nancy Rodriguez Community Center, you can see little nibs on the mountains, and those are all the volcanic cones in the Caja del Rio Grande. Here's some a mountain view from the Poake Valley. The snow pack was a really important thing for, how the river started to erode the Santa Fe River Valley. And here's a picture you don't see too often, but you can actually see the two reservoirs, and they're snow covered at this point. and Tom Blogg took an airplane photo of them. So each spring, as the mountain snowpack melted, huge floods deposited topsoil along the Santa Fe River, creating an alluvial plain. And this fertile area was perfectly suited for irrigated farming because of its topography of a slight gravity flow back towards the Santa Fe River. And Native Americans were attracted to this place dating back 7,000 BCE. And we actually discovered some pit houses at the Pindi Pueblo excavations in Agua Fria. And so, in fact, almost as soon as peoples came across the land bridge from Asia, 13,000 BCE, they wound up in New Mexico. And we have the Clovis, Folsom, and Sandia Man sites, and they all date back to 12,000 BCE. Across the 47 miles of the Santa Fe River that Andy mentioned, and actually it's only 46 now that's flowing because the Cochiti Dam project took up about a mile of that. There's 8 Laboratory of Anthropology, also known as LA sites in Agua Fria. And, there's many archaeological sites, found under the Santa Fe Convention Center, Cieneguitas, La Cieneguilla, at the San Antonio Capilla, at Alamo, at La Cienega, at La Bajada, at Peña Blanca, and Cochiti. And these sites were inhabited for maybe 100 to 300 years, and we don't really know why they would abandon a site and build a whole new site. Maybe the ground that they were farming kind of played out, or maybe it was some kind of religious context that they were thinking of. But most of these sites fall into the time period 1100 to 1400. And the patrimony of these sites is claimed by Tesuque Pueblo. So here's a picture of Sherry Scheck, and it doesn't look too good, but she's of Southwest Archaeology Consultants, and she did all the excavation there in Agua Fria. And our major site dates back to 3500 BCE. And she's at the annual Pecos Conference, which is at the Pecos National Monument. And all these archaeologists get together and discuss what they're working on. So she did a 2009 excavation of our Agua Fria Road because we were putting in a sewer system, and they went down 12 feet for that excavation. Here, this is the water tank site, and you can kind of see to the left-hand side, there's an actual water tank. And I volunteered on this site, and we just went in and looked at what was there. It was very interesting archaeology. There were 3 major Santa Fe River floods that covered this site, but the people, continued to live there. And by 1400, all the pueblos along the Santa Fe River were abandoned, except for, Santo Domingo, which is now Queres, and Cochiti. Pindi Pueblo was resettled in 1425 and was abandoned by 1450. There's no known reason for this. So, we have the Spanish exploration. And of course, it starts with Coronado in 1539. He crisscrosses the Santa Fe River several times and gets all the way up to Taos. The Chamuscando Rodriguez in 1581, they went through all the Santa Fe area. 1582, Antonio de Espejo went, and the explorers were probably looking for gold. I mean, some type of riches, but they just really went all over, and they saw a bunch of ruins but they didn't understand what they were all about. In 1590, Castaño de Sosa, he went up the Galisteo River and then into the Santa Fe area. And he spent quite a bit of time there, but it was an unauthorized expedition. See, all these expeditions, you had to pay tribute to the crown to get a royal license, or you were you were conducting a legal expedition. And then lastly, Oñate. So the Camino Real, runs from Mexico City to San Juan Pueblo and even into the San Luis Valley in Colorado. And, the explorers basically followed Native American trails that were quite well established for 1,000 or 2,000 years before this. So the Camino Real, Oñate came up this way, but there was also an old Spanish trail that branches off from what is San Juan Pueblo on this map, or Oñate's San Gabriel, his capital of Nuevo Mexico. And that old Spanish trail goes all the way out to California. And so when we look at the archaeological records at Pindi Pueblo and Agua Fria, we find seashells and little tiny small seashells that were probably made into necklaces. And they were traded with some type of California Native Americans. And, we're not sure. They probably traded turquoise for those shells. And they got the turquoise from the Cerrillos Hills down on Highway 14. And when they did some tests of some of the Aztec idols, solid gold idols with turquoise as their eyes, and that turquoise actually came from Cerrillos also. And then there was also in the Mexican National Museum, there's a turkey feather robe that one of the medicine men of the Aztecs used. And that robe, the turkey feathers, came from the northern New Mexico area. And in our 2009 archaeological study, we actually found a half of a turkey robe in that archaeology. And here's another map of the Camino Real, and it was this Dr. Roland Willard traveled the El Camino Real in 1825, which is kind of, probably he was one of the first Anglo people to have traveled the Camino. So on January 8th, 1598, Juan de Oñate, he takes off from El Paso del Norte. By July 11th, they reach the Native American village of Okeawinge that they named San Juan. And Oñate builds this temporary camp just off to the side of that, and they name it San Juan de los Caballeros, and meaning that, they were the guys with the horses, right? And a few months later, they moved to the old village of Yuque, and that was west of the Rio Grande. And this is what they named San Gabriel, and that became the capital of Nuevo Mexico. So here's a Agua Fria timeline, and because my specialty's in Agua Fria village, and so we've got the 7,000 BCE pit houses, 3,000 BCE, the first large settlement. And, initial writings about this say that it may be the oldest, largest settlement in the continental USA. And what enabled them to do this was that they domesticated turkeys. And so Pindi actually means turkey in the Tewa language. So Pindi Pueblo, loosely translated because it goes across two languages, Tewa and Spanish, that it would be Turkey Town. So you know, I always get a giggle out of that one. Then our next, you know, we often talk about it in terms of three distinct civilizations. So our second one, from 100 BCE to 800 of the Common Era, is our second large settlement. And then our third one is from 1100 to 1450, and that would be our third large settlement. And then if we just look at the historic records that we have, Francisco de Madrid got a land grant for the Agua Fria area in 1640, and he may have come to Agua Fria as early as 1603, because that's when he left El Paso on an expedition. In 1776, Fray Dominguez lists 57 families and 297 people in Pueblo Quemado. And that was kind of the historic name for the Agua Fria area. And there is actual Pueblo Quemado. And if you go out on West Alameda, there's a road named Pueblo Quemado. And Pueblo Quemado existed along the Santa Fe River for about a mile. But a lot of the actual room blocks and stuff have actually been taken out by floods and soil erosion. So in 1846, Agua Fria makes the first American map. Lieutenant Albert of the American Expeditionary Force maps our area and calls Agua Fria for the first time. So here's a picture from actually from the History Museum, and it shows these turkey pens that have been excavated by Stubbs and Stallings in 1932 to 33. And the cedar for the turkey pens actually never rotted when these roofs collapsed on top of them. So they actually were able to find these turkey pens. And this is an article by Eric Blinman and Stephen Post, two archaeologists, and you can find it under When the Turkeys Come Home to Roost in the December 2013 issue of the El Palacio magazine. This is a map I drew because in doing our oral history interviews, there were about 35 site names that Agua Fria residents that were born, say before 1960, they knew, but you know, these no longer are really on the map. And so it's a historic Agua Fria map. And in 1909, the U.S. Surveyor General went and formally surveyed the area. And if you notice, there are all these long, skinny tracks, some of them only as small as 99 feet. And the reason for that is that then each tract had the access to the acequia to get water to their properties. And here's a picture based on the 1914 state engineer's hydrologic survey. And it was this kind of made into a diorama by a firm from Boston called Content Design. And they knew the location from the state engineer's maps of all the houses, all the acequias, and all the fields and what was growing in each field. So they just, colored it in that way. At the very bottom of the map is the Santa Fe River, and it was pretty much running year-round when there weren't dams on it. So we have an old Browning camera here. It was, the people in Agua Fria were very poor, and so they didn't have any photographs of events, but they would invite in this man. His name was El Señor, and no one knows who this person is. And he would take pictures of weddings and feast days and that kind of thing. And that's why we have the photographic record that we have. And most of these photos actually have wound up in the photo archives at the history library of the Cultural Affairs Department. And this is a photo of my wife's grandfather. He's leading the donkey, and there's several, a boy and 5 girls from Agua Fria village. And this was kind of a gag photo that the Museum of New Mexico traveling photographers did. And this is about 1912. And, so all of you'll see in Tesuque village, you'll see the same picture. You'll see it in La Cienega. But that's all of our photographic history. And so I'm going to go kind of quickly through some photos here. Here's corn being roasted in an horno, and this is from Tomas Romero. But this is the way that people lived. Here's the our general store that belonged to the Romeros. It was probably opened about 1900. We know it existed in the 1905 business directory, and it went out of business about 1955. And this is the new general store run by Jose Antonio Romero's nephew, Amarante Romero. He started in 1951, and he went out of business in 1991, and he blames Walmart for that. Here's Agustin Torres, and this is 1941, and he's generally considered the last man to drive a wagon on the El Camino Real in the Santa Fe County area. This is Bernabe Romero, and he has his pet goat, and he's going uptown. And he used to, he was the last man probably to free range goats up until like the 1970, and he just went up the Santa Fe River and had them graze. Here's the 4-H club sponsors, and they had a float in the Fiesta Parade that year. Here's the Women's Altar Society for the San Isidro Church. Here they are plastering. This was called women's work. The women actually plastered the San Isidro Church, and this was in about 1930. Here's another picture of that, another one. And here's the interior of the San Isidro Church in 1915. This is kind of a San Isidro Day celebration. San Isidro, of course, is the patron saint of farmers. And so all the girls would dress up, and then they would pick a queen for San Isidro Day. And they had all types of festivities then. Let's go through some of these all-time photos. We're going to present the PowerPoint to you later, and you'll be able to see the citations for these photos and where they're at. But we've got orchards. This is what they call the rooster pool, and this happened each year on June 24th, El Dia de San Juan, and they had a little fiesta. This is also the rooster pool, and you can't quite see it, but in the center of the photo here is a man actually trying to pull the rooster out of the ground, and then he would, once he got it, he would take it to his relatives and they would cook it up. And it was really a good way to get rid of those young roosters in the chicken pens that were causing a lot of problems. Here's a double Arno. I'm not quite sure how that was used. And here's Alamo Lane in Agua Fria, probably about 1900. Here's the church in about 1880. Here's, oh gosh, it's our wood carver, Gallegos, that he's very famous. He had exhibits in the Chicago Museum of Modern Art, and he just carved santos. This is my mother-in-law, and she's about 4 years old, and she's standing in front of some corn stalks that have been harvested, and these are going to keep the animals, fed throughout the winter. There's butchering a sheep, and people started to lay adobes as a way of making a living. Probably about 1945, the acequias just weren't producing any water for the people. That was spring cleaning. Here's the sister taking all of the people for a picnic down by the Santa Fe River. And we have so few pictures. Here's the Agua Fria school, the county school. Here's Sam Montoya in 1919. He's doing what they called vamos a trampe. So they would hitch a ride on a train and they would go out to a railroad site and work there. And then they would build up enough money to have a dowry to come back to Agua Fria and marry their bride of their choice. These guys are miners. The same with these guys. This is Jose Lino Montoya and his wife Elisa in 1898. And here's a letter that was written to ask for the hand in marriage of a woman. So you had to be very formal about these things. Actually, this Martin Baca wrote it for Hilario Baca because he was kind of like his uncle, and you couldn't directly speak to the woman's father. You had to go through channels. Here's World War II. On the right is Eustaquio Lopez. He was our most decorated soldier in Agua Fria, but so many of them volunteered and had all kinds of citations. But they all left to fight in the war, and so basically no one was left to do the farming in the village. And there was an order from the federal government to close the acequias so that the water could be diverted to like Bruns Army Hospital, and also the Japanese prisoner, or Japanese concentration camp in Casa Solana. And so all the water went for their production of vegetables. This is a map that you can actually see on the Santa Fe River Trail. And it's an early 1949 photo. And it just says, you know, some of the points, but you can already see that the Santa Fe River's kind of widening out. There's already been some sand and gravel operations. Oh, my internet connection is unstable, it's saying here. Here's the Monte Vista feed store. This is the Maridomo Herman Montoya of the Santa Fe acequias. Here's John Stevenson in 1978. He's in his cornfields for the Santa Fe Community Farm. This is a picture out of the New Mexican. And let's see, here's the El Camino Real Park trailhead. We have a number of county and city parks along the river now. Eventually we'll have a 26-mile-long trail along the river. And one of our partners is the National Park Service in this project. The federal BLM has sold us land to Santa Fe County. And we're really trying to restore a lot of the river, you know, because of that devastating sand and gravel excavations. You know, the America Byways is in partnership with the National Park Service and the CARTA, the Camino Real Association, and they've done a marking of the historic Camino Real Trail. We have a really great county open space and trails program, and their vision for all of these trails is called the Grand Unified Trail System, or GUTS. And so you can see trails throughout the Santa Fe River area, but also along its tributaries like Arroyo de los Frijoles, Arroyo Chamizo. You know, it's just a real preservation event that's going on. And, you know, thank you for looking at that. And, you know, on each one of these slides, I actually have notes of where their citations come from, little side stories. So if you want to browse through that at a later point, please feel free. And thank you to the Friends of History for putting this together.